The life and career of former News at 10 presenter and ITN reporter Sandy Gall has been remembered following his death at the age of 97. As a foreign correspondent, he reported on some of the biggest stories of the 20th century, including the Vietnam War. He was one of the few Western journalists to remain there after the fall of Saigon. Sandy's work also saw him receive royal recognition. James Mates looks back at some of his highlights.
For decades, one of the most familiar faces on television, co-presenting News at 10 at a time when it was the most watched news programme in Britain.
Former Soviet Prime Minister
Sandy Gall was not a simple newsreader, but an authentic, hardened news reporter who also read the news.
Good evening. All the IRA hunger strikers are eating again.
Joining ITN in 1963, one of his first assignments was to Dallas, Texas, just hours after the world had been shaken by the assassination of President Kennedy.
From that high window in the center of Dallas, Texas, at about 1 p.m. last Friday, President Kennedy was assassinated. After 4 days in jail...
The world was changing fast, nowhere more so than in America's Deep South, as Martin Luther King fought for civil rights.
I asked him the aims of his campaign.
To get Negroes the right to vote.
As the US slid inexorably into war in Vietnam, Sandy Gall was, almost literally, the first in and last out.
They face pretty formidable odds down there.
There to see US troops come ashore in 1965.
We hope we don't get hit in the process.
One of the very few who dared to stay on after the North Vietnamese victory a decade later.
This is a historic moment, the arrival of the North Vietnamese regular army in Saigon.
And then we couldn't get out, of course. They cut off all communications, the North Vietnamese. It took us about 2 weeks to get out.
45 seconds to transmission.
The move into the News at 10 studio was not an obvious one. Described by his editor as having the face of a benign pugilist enhanced by a minicab smash. Gall, alongside Alistair Burnett and Reggie Bosanquet, was one of the new breed of presenter reporters. But Sandy never lost the yearning to be on the road, and as the Mujahideen fought a 10-year guerrilla war against the Soviet army in Afghanistan, there was only one way to cover it: on foot, on horseback, weeks of travelling through the Hindu Kush.
Although travel with the Mujahideen is bad enough in summer, in winter it's extremely hard.
I have this image of Sandy on Amit Shah Massoud's tank as they roll down into Kabul. I mean, that was the sort of correspondent he was. And I know it's a cliche. I don't think you'll see the like of him again.
In 1992, at the age of 65, he finally decided he needed to slow down, though not without some regret. It couldn't go on forever, but for one of the greatest television journalists of his generation, what a career it was.
Remembering our colleague, Sandy Gall, who's died at the age of 97.